Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our EEX webinar focused on the Nordic Zonal Power Future launch. I would like to introduce the speakers for today. My name is Tim Greenwood. I'm the Director of Sales and Managing Director of the exchange. And I'm also joined with my colleague, Stefan Riediger, who is Director of Business Development for Power and for the global commodity markets. And in the next half an hour, we are going to talk through our plans for EEX Nordic Zonal Futures. And at the end, we'll have some time to answer any questions that you have. This webinar will be recorded and will be available shortly on the EEX webpage. As I said, questions can be raised. You'll find somewhere a question and answer button in the Teams chat. Please pose your questions and thereafter we will cover them. So if we can perhaps move to slide 3 to start off, I will briefly go through the agenda we have for today. Okay, skip one next slide, please, on page 3. We are first of all going to have a general update on the EEX initiatives in the Nordic market. We'll also focus on the rationale for the zonal futures in the Nordic power market. We'll briefly dive into the product specifications, talk a little bit about the link between the zonal power futures and the system price via the EEX spread functionality. Thereafter, we'll talk about how to get access. And then, as I mentioned, we have some time to answer any questions that you have. Yeah. So can we move to the next slide, please? So following requests from the market, the EEX plans to launch zonal futures, or plan to launch zonal futures dating back to 2019 and 2020. So we've had these plans for quite a long time, but unfortunately, most of you would have heard there was a bit of a crisis in the market between 2020, 2022, which put these plans on the back burner. Everybody was focused on other stuff, but now we see the time is right to actually go forward with supporting these new products and wish to bring them to market. I would also like to mention that the introduction of these zonal futures is independent of the pending transaction with Nasdaq, which is currently under review by the European Commission. And as part of their regular process, the Commission does a market assessment and reaches out to clients on their views of the transaction. We are cooperating with the Commission on this and providing any information that they require. But at this moment in time, we will solely be focusing on the introduction of the zonal power futures. So perhaps we can move to the next slide. I believe that is with you, Stefan, as well, to talk about the rationale of the products.
Yes, thank you, Tim. Indeed, market participants approached us already 2019 and 2020 and put forward the idea of launching zonal futures in the Nordic market. And together with market participants, we were looking deeper into the setup of the Nordic electricity market. And as you can see here on that slide, it's a region, it's a relatively large region with a very diverse electricity generation mix. These 4 countries, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Finland, have a complete different electricity generation mix, as you can see. When we look at Denmark, for example, which is driven predominantly by offshore wind, in contrast to Norway, driven by hydro. And then when we look at Sweden and Finland, with a strong share of nuclear power generation, That has led to a decoupling of the respective bidding zones from the system price, which is the average price over all those four countries. Therefore, market participants came up with the idea of launching zonal futures. If we go to the next slide, we can see that even in more detail. And I don't want to go through this table one by one, but what it shows you is the correlation of the average annual price in all these 12 bidding zones in relation to the annual average of the system price indexed to 100. When we look at last year, 2022, here on the bottom of the page, you can see for Denmark 1, Denmark 2, there was very little correlation. And when we look at Trondheim and Tromsø, on the other hand of the scale, also very, very little correlation to the system price, as these markets came either significantly higher or lower compared to the system price. Therefore, the demand for alternative hedging tools came up with market participants. Now, if we look at the next slide, we can clearly see, and this is important from EEX's perspective, that it's the market that will ultimately decide where liquidity will be pooled. EEX, as a market infrastructure provider, what we will do is we will provide choice to the market where and how to hedge price risks for the Nordic market. So on the one hand side, we will launch zonal futures for all the Nordic bidding zones, and we are happy to announce today that the go live will take place in the course of Q1 2024. At the same time, the current Nordic system price futures, which are listed on EEX since a couple of years, will remain listed on EEX. In addition to these two sets of products, the EEX will also enable location spread functionality between the zones and the system price, as well as in between the zones, and equally important, between the new Nordic zonal futures and the existing EEX power futures on the rest of the continent, such as the German or the Dutch market, for example. So with this concept of zonal futures and system price futures both being available on one platform, we really enable the market to choose what works best for their trading needs. Tim, over to you to maybe give a bit more detail on how these zonal futures work in relation to the existing market model.
Okay, Stefan, happy to do so. If we can move over to the next slide, please, which is slide 8. Then what we can see here is that the zonal futures is a economic equivalent of a combi trade. You can see in the table on the left here, a combi trade made up of a trade of the system price and an EPAD, whereas in this economic equivalent is possible just through one trade, as shown on the right-hand side of the slide. That allows a combination of different focuses. For example, it allows you to actually isolate the local market price by using a combination of the zonal futures and the system price futures to trade. I think it is also important to note that we have the suite of zonal system price futures which are still available from the maturities of the weeks up to 5 out, 7 months, 7 quarters, and 6 years. And it is also possible to do location spread trading between the zonal futures and the system price futures, for which Stefan will go into a bit more detail shortly. So if we can carry on to the next slide, please. Then, which is slide 9. it is our general intention to improve the price transparency in this market. We wish to improve this price transparency for the Nordic bidding zones to create robust long-term price signals. We also wish to do this with our sister exchange platform, the spot market platform, EEX. EEX, as most of you know, run the respective spot markets, or a number in Europe. They have trusted harmonized indices. In this particular case, they will be providing the underlying reference prices for the futures market. And this also means for companies trading these markets that they are able to facilitate the physical delivery of these future products using the EEX exchange. So a combination of this, we're expecting, as I said, improve price transparency, clear signals, and thus improve liquidity for the Nordic market. So can we pass on or carry on to slide 10, please? So on slide 10, here we delve into a little bit more detail about the respective products that we are offering to the market. Yeah, you can see on the left side, we are covering 4 different countries: Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Sweden. Next to it, you can see the different bidding zones that are being launched, as Stefan mentioned, in the first quarter of next year. And interestingly for you, on the right, you can see the mix of the different maturities that we are offering in the different contracts. You will notice that some of the bidding zones, we are planning to have an extended number of maturities for the start, and some a little bit less. The reason for this is we have evaluated the availability of interconnectors in the region, levels of existing liquidity, and the prevalence and the planned buildup of renewable energy. And it is our intention to make a suite of maturities available to actually hedge the required underlying sources of the energy. So as an example here in the Danish segment, you can see that we're planning to launch days, weeks, months, quarters, and years. Whereas at this current time, for the 4 different bidding zones, the 5 different bidding zones that we have in Norway, a number of those, the NO3, the 4, and the 5, we are just solely focusing on months, quarters, and the years for this initial phase. If we can move over to slide 11, please. Slide 11 shows the contract specifications in a bit more detail. As I said before, we will be distributing this presentation thereafter. So this is something a bit more for your reading material, where you can see in detail the overall overview of the different specifications and maturities, and a bit more basic information. Okay, so thanks for that. And for slide number 12, I will pass back over to Stefan to delve in a bit more detail to the location spread trading.
Thank you, Tim. And indeed, let me connect to the topic of spread trading functionality that I've mentioned earlier. So while we will launch 12 different bidding zones here on the platform, we will build upon a functionality that exists in all our other European power markets and has proven to attract liquidity and to bridge liquidity between different markets. So we firmly believe that liquidity in the Nordics can be unlocked through this location spread trading functionality. What the table here shows you is that EEX will, from day one, enable spread trading between the different individual zones, as well as between the zones and the system price. In addition to that, and that is very important to many participants that are not yet active in the Nordic market, We will also enable spread trading functionality between selected Nordic bidding zones and EEX's existing power futures in the continental market. Why is that? There is a lot of interconnection capacity already and will be further built between the Nordic and the continent. For example, between Denmark and the Netherlands, Germany and Norway, Sweden and Poland. With zonal futures and the spread functionality, market participants can trade and hedge the price risks between such two zones. Additionally, in order to build liquidity, EEX will also run market-making tenders for these Nordic zonal futures in due course. Finally, it's important that it's not on EEX to decide which specific spreads will be available on the platform. The final setup of location spreads is ultimately determined by the market, and we can easily enable additional spreads between zones or zones in the Nordics and the continent if the market wishes so. With that, I hand over back to Tim for an explanation of how market participants can start trading these new products.
So as part of the EEX model, which is active in a large number of European countries at the moment, we can split the access between two different ways of accessing the market. The first of these is through an EEX membership. We already have a number of companies, a substantial number of companies, which access the market in this way. This is a so-called direct access. A direct access means you become a member of the respective exchange. You have a clearing bank in place, and you choose your preferred trading infrastructure front end and trade directly. We also have the possibility to access the market indirectly. Indirect access, that means that you are not a member of the exchange and you trade over a market service provider, market access provider in this case. And the choice depends on the respective companies. We would usually say that companies which are trading on the EEX already stay to their preferred market model that they are using now. If you wish to go into this in more detail, I would suggest contacting your account manager or pinging an email to sales@eex.com if you have any specific questions and wish to cover that in more detail. As I mentioned, the indirect access, if we look on the next slide, you can see a list of the 29 clearing members that we have here. The 29 clearing members are facilitating our members. Every single member needs a clearing bank in place, and a number of these are also offering this indirect access to the market. That's why we have on this slide over 600 plus participants. A participant is a company that trades on the EEX either through its direct membership or indirectly over one of these clearing companies listed on the right. Before we move on, it is also important to note our broker community. The EEX has a long-standing, healthy relationship with a number of brokers. This is a very important part of our market model in facilitating trade registration, and is important part of the model in the creation and building up of new markets as well, which has been proven elsewhere throughout Europe in the development of the liquidity. This is also our intention for the launch of the zonal power futures, to work closely with the brokers in building up the liquidity in this market. So thereafter, we can move on to slide 15. And in slide 15, I'll pass back on to Stefan, who will round up some of the key benefits before we open the floor to questions.
Thank you, Tim. And indeed, that already concludes our update about the launch of the zonal futures, but let me recap the benefits of these new products for the market. First of all, we are looking here at a large pool of participants that will trade these new products. The zonal futures will not only enable Nordic participants to hedge their price risks more efficiently, it's also many new players from continental Europe who are not yet active in the Nordic market that have shown strong interest in such products over the past couple of months and actually years. We are connecting the Nordic with the continental European markets with the very unique EEX spread functionality and linking zonal futures between each other, zonal futures against system price and zonal futures against other zones on the continent. We provide any trading opportunity that market participants may wish. Thirdly, and this is really important, it's the market participants who decide where and how to trade. We are a market infrastructure provider. Therefore, EEX provides the full choice of products, be it system price or zonal futures, and we will launch the spread functionality in addition. As Tim just explained, it will be easy to access these new products. Anyone who is already active in EEX Nordic Power will be able to trade Nordic zonal futures from day one. New clients, as Tim just explained, have the choice to either become member of the EEX or to access the market through a broad network of our indirect market access providers. And then finally, we firmly believe that the zonal futures will provide for better capital efficiencies. The zonal futures really allow to hedge price risks with just one product. And that allows for a more efficient collateral management, as it will also provide for cross-margin effects when trading different zones or offsets between Nordic zones and the continental Europe zones. So as you can see, we are really committed to developing the Nordic market. And as you may know, it's EEX's DNA to build markets together. And we are here to build this market together with you, the trading, clearing, and broking community, as we've done in many other markets across Europe and, in fact, across the world. With that, we conclude the presentation part of today and are very much looking forward to taking your questions.
So we have some questions in here already. Would you like me to read them out and then we can go through these? Yeah. So Stefan, the first question that we have is, how do you plan to mark closing prices for the zones that are quite illiquid and often do not trade for days? So would you like to cover or shall I cover?
You can cover it.
I can cover, okay. So the EEX has a proven track record of doing marking closing prices for a lot of contracts. If you have a look at the markets that we cover in Europe, we do have quite a number of liquid maturities. We go very far out the curve in some areas, and these all have to be settled if open interest exists. So how we do this, usually we use a methodology of interacting between trades and orders in the order book and requests from the market and service providers for price signals as well. That usually means the best way to mark these closing prices is with the order book, with trades if possible. If that's not the case, we will use orders. If that is not the case, we will use so-called fair value estimates from the market. And that basically means we have contact with a number of market participants of where they see the market. We take the average of those, removing respective outliers, and we settle the market in that way. Obviously, this is the bread and butter of the exchange to do such things. as well, and it's one of our core focuses to be able to provide decent settlement prices for the market. And then we can move on to, you have a comment?
Two questions that we've received. There is one question: do you have any market makers lined up for the zones already? And then there is another question that goes into the direction: how are market makers selective if the market chooses where liquidity is? Is there going to be market makers for selected products or price areas to start and then later on expand to others? Well, let me answer the first question. We have already market participants indeed that signaled their willingness to act as market makers. What we're going to do, as I mentioned earlier, is we're going to run a market making tender process where we will offer market participants the opportunity to participate in that tender process and signal their willingness to commit to specific spreads or specific times where they are willing to support with liquidity. This is a process that has been in place in other European markets already and has proven to improve liquidity even in young markets quite significantly.
Okay, shall we carry on? Then we have a question at the bottom. Will trading a location spread result in a single position in that particular spread or in two positions? One in the system price and one in the specific price area, for example. Yeah. What's important to note here that the spreads are actually not products, but they're combination orders. What that means is that we actually have separate order books in place for the outrights and for the spreads, and anything that is in the spread order book is implied into the respective outrights and vice versa as well. So if you see, for an example, orders in the respective outright order books, you will see an implied price in the spread order book, and anybody that is putting something in the spread order book will see the same in the outrights and vice versa. This is a way of facilitating the liquidity, and yes, so that means that if you're actually trading a location spread that results in a position, it actually results in two separate positions, one long in one of the order books and one short in the next one. One thing to mention also as well that those spread also exists outside of the Nordic zonal and price. It's still possible to spread some of these products against other markets as well. Yeah. But as I said, this is a combination of the orders and not a specific product on its own right.
I can take the next question. There is low liquidity in EPADs today, so what will actually change with the new setup? Well, what we provide here is choice for the market, really choice for the market where and how to trade. And what we hear and see in the feedbacks from market participants is that zonal futures will provide for additional liquidity that does not exist in the Nordic market yet. Why is that? Look at, for example, a market participants from the Netherlands who wants to hedge cross-border price risk because of the interconnectors. The market participants from the Netherlands would find it very difficult today to hedge using a system price and then an EPAD for the respective Norwegian bidding zone or Danish bidding zone. He can do that by trading just one product going forward and trade the spread against the Netherlands. Same holds true for market participants in Denmark, for example, who today, according to what we hear from the market, apparently hedge predominantly in Germany. Yeah, so they have the choice then to really hedge locally or trade in an adjacent zone that may feature more liquidity. Ultimately, it's the choice of every market participant to hedge locally using zonal futures or to hedge in adjacent zones that may correlate well and feature higher liquidity. So on a personal note, do we believe that all the 12 bidding zones will become equally liquid? Probably not. What we believe in, and I think that's also the belief of many market participants that at least some of the zones will establish themselves as kind of like regional liquidity pools. In particular, Danish ones, Southern Norwegian or Swedish ones, and also Finland, with Finland being one country, one zone. So therefore, ultimately, we provide choice. Tim, you want to take the next question?
Yeah, perhaps you can read it out so I can see it. There's quite a few questions in here.
Who should we contact if we want to give feedback on the products or talk about membership?
Okay, so we've noticed in the question answer, so many thanks for the numerous questions you sent. A number of these are extremely detailed and will need more than 1 or 2 seconds in a webinar to go through. So it will be our recommendation to contact your respective account manager if you know who that is. Hopefully you do. If you do not know who an account manager is, then I would suggest just sending an email to sales@eex.com. So that's sales@eex.com. Within that email address, all of the account managers have access, and we will distribute the questions to the respective account managers in the areas who will get back to you with more information or arrange a call to talk about it in a bit more detail.
There's another question here coming in. Would you estimate the launch taking place rather in the former or the latter half of Q1? I think it's fair to say that the earlier half of Q1 2024, when we look at January and maybe early February, this is typically the time after Christmas, after New Year, when there is other focus for everyone in the industry. So I think it's fair to assume as a launch is somewhere around mid Q1 or the latter half of Q1.
Okay, thanks, Stefan. Then we have a couple of questions about initial margin examples. Any update on this? All I can say at the moment is the work that we've been doing on the zonal futures has obviously been put on hold for a number of weeks, and we're restarting that work. That includes making examples or estimations of the initial margins available, but they are not formally published, but it will be before the launch. What I will say is that the initial margin setup will work in exactly the same way as all of the other different products. So there should be no nasty surprises there for the initial margins. But it'd be nice if you give us a little bit more time to get that sorted out. It'll be available before the launch, but at this moment in time, we cannot send that information around.
There is another question. When will the exact go-live date be announced? Well, we will announce the go-live date probably at the beginning of next year, to allow everyone to prepare for the launch, as I said, in the middle of Q1 or in the latter half of Q1. Again, today is really an update and to reassure our commitment to launch these zonal futures at the beginning of in the first quarter of next year. The exact go-live date will then be published probably just after New Year.
Then I'll take up another question here. In your ECC clearing network of 29 different members, we can see one Nordic player, which is SEB. What is your plan to expand this access for Nordic utilities, retailers, etc., that might not have any relationship with any of these clearing banks? This is a good question. First of all, it should be noted that the 29 that we have are covering all of the different markets worldwide, and that we strongly believe the location of the clearing member is not decisive. In fact, we cover in Europe a number of different markets, and we have a substantial number of local utility companies which are using clearing banks based elsewhere and based out of their region. But at the same time, we also see the need to push for locality with the clearing banks, and that actually comes with the development and the liquidity of the respective markets. Obviously, here we're focusing on the Nordic Zonal Futures, so the Nordic area. As you mentioned, we have one local company which is based here, and it is part of our plan to push and next to extend that. The increasing liquidity in the area will hopefully see some more interest from the local players in that market. But in a nutshell, if you need access, you are not restricted to solely Nordic companies. It might mean building up a new relationship to trade, but there are a number of clearing banks there and a number or a larger choice for you to be able to compare conditions of these respective banks.
And I take the next question. There are a couple of questions that have been raised again about the proposed transaction with Nasdaq. Again, it's important to understand that the introduction of zonal futures that we are talking about here is completely independent from the deal that is currently under review by the European Commission. As Tim said in the intro, EEX is working constructively with the Commission, and as part of that regular process, the Commission might also reach out to individual market participants for a market assessment. We cannot comment on any timeline, as that is clearly not in our hands, but in the hands of the Commission with regards to a potential clearing of the transaction.
And then I can see a question on the maturities that we expect for the zonal futures. Could we, for example, see a 10-year NO2 CAL product? On slide 11 of the presentation, we've given an overview of the different maturities we will have for the launch. Within your question here, for example, for the Norwegian segment, we will be covering 4 weeks, 6 full months, 7 full quarters, and 6 full years. So we're not covering the 10, CAL plus 10 at this moment, up to CAL plus 6. But those of you who have traded on the EEX for a while will see that we will note that we've had a proven track record of actually trying to develop these markets as well. We're talking about a launch, and therefore it's obviously open to the development of the market to actually extend and change these maturities. So what we launch is not set in stone forever. We listen to the market needs, and if that is required to extend, it might be a future plan to do so. But at the moment, we're talking about the early phase. We're sticking in the example of Norway here, just to CAL plus 6 contracts.
I can take the next question. There is a question coming in. Can you be more specific on the launch date of the zonal futures again? Is it the 1st of January or Q1? Clearly, it's the launch is planned for Q1. What we mentioned is that it's likely to be in the middle or the second half of Q1. Yeah, and we will announce the exact go live date then at the beginning of the year. So let me just repeat that again for clarity. So Q1, somewhere mid Q1, second half of Q1, that's the launch. And we will announce the exact launch date at the beginning of the year.
Okay, thanks, Stefan. So there's one question here we have on the capital efficiency and more efficient capital collateral management. Do you have any estimates of how much lower initial margin is with the zonal futures due to the current Nasdaq setup of the system price and the EPAD? As I said, it will take a little bit of time to publish these. In theory, we're talking about the same price list reflected with the closing time. In the setup that we have, we only have one margin calculation because we're talking about one product and not 2 products in this case. And also it depends on each individual company. It is important to look at the initial margin not solely outright for a lot of companies, but in conjunction with their respective open interest they have in a number of other markets as well. So it would make more sense to publish these in detail and then to see the effect for each individual companies of how this margin is. For example, if companies have a substantial position in German power, with us, that is possible to offset these margins and to actually reduce your margin collateral requirements instead of increasing it as well. That's one of the unique selling arguments of the launch of the zonal futures here, is that companies have substantial open interest in other products with us at the moment, and adding these into that provides an efficient setup for managing these margins. But as I say, it'd be nice to if we could have a bit more time on that, and we will get back to the market, I would say earlier, at the start of next year.
Let me take one more question here, Tim, that came in. Which one of these spreads that you've presented will be liquid in your view? Well, we are a market infrastructure provider, so what we can provide is choice. Yeah, and we can provide choice for market participants, in a sense, providing the right products and providing spreads in between these different products. Ultimately, it's up to the market to decide which of these spreads that you mentioned will become liquid. Again, we've had significant interest from market participants on the continent who are not yet active in the Nordic market to start trading the Nordic contracts once the zonal futures are available, because then they can easily trade the spread, as I said, Denmark, Germany, Norway, Germany, or Netherlands, Denmark, Poland, Sweden, something like that. But really, we as EEX, we don't have a clear view of which of these spreads will be more liquid or less liquid. Looking at the questions here, I think we've covered pretty much all of that. There's one more that just came in. When will you publish exact product codes as they are needed to implement these new products in various systems? Yes, indeed. This would normally be part of the deck of the customer information pack that we publish together with the go live date. It's a very fair point, so I can take that with me here, because the product codes are already available, at least for preparation here on the EEX side, and also when it comes to the clearing bank. So I'll take it back with the team here that we could publish the product codes already before the go live date, to allow market participants to implement the new products in your internal systems as soon as possible.
Okay, looking through, we have thoughts about zonal futures in Italy. Have we moved Italy to Scandinavia? Don't think so. Yeah, we're following the development in Italy, obviously, with what's going on, but this is a separate topic at the moment. I'm pretty sure in the future there'll be required changes and stuff in the Italian market. Well, we're not going into detail too much about that in this call. Perhaps we can do that bilaterally sometime.
There's one more question coming in. The recording of this session, which format will it be shared in? On your website, so everyone who didn't participate today can see it? Yes, absolutely. So we will make the recording available on our website in due course. Maybe not already this afternoon, because it requires some whatever the technical team has to do. So please be patient with us, but beginning of next week, we should have the video up on the website. Thank you very much for all your questions. I can see there's a long list of questions. I hope that we've covered all of that. If we missed the one or the other question, which I can't see at the moment, please do me a favor. Please reach out to Tim and myself. You have our contact details, I guess. Other than that, also please feel free to send an email to sales@eex.com, and we'll be more than happy to engage also in bilateral discussions with you. With that, Tim, over to you.
Yeah, just one more mention that we have a Nordic page on our EEX website, and we will update our Q&As to this page from the seminar and to cover them in more detail. So, as I said, we've had a substantial number of questions here. Some of them will need to go into a bit more detail and bilaterally. So hopefully you have your understanding for that. But as I said, look on the eex.com webpage thereafter, and we'll be covering that. Okay, so that wraps up today. So many thanks from myself and from Stefan. Thank you for all of your questions. We've literally been bombarded by questions. So we can see we've had an extremely healthy webinar today. So many thanks for your attendance, and we'll stay in contact. So have a good afternoon, everybody, and see you soon, hopefully.